KNXT Channel 2.
The grand jury reports that 90% of all juvenile arrests in Los Angeles County are for narcotic-related offenses. And in the last 9 years, such arrests have increased by 2,000%.
I don't know, do I frighten you? Because like a lot of people look at me around the streets and think that I'm a criminal because I use drugs. My parents think I'm a criminal, and I've been told that I was a criminal because I use something that I enjoy doing. But the people around me don't think I am. The body that's connected to this leg is a very good friend of mine, and I care an awful lot about him. And when he looks at me, he doesn't see someone who takes a lot of drugs. He doesn't see a sex maniac. He doesn't see a pervert, but he sees what I am.
24% of the patients at the Los Angeles County Hospital are cases of drug overdose.
I think something should be said about our parents and the adults that the kids have as images, people that they watch and admire. The ones that get up in the morning and just can't seem to make it, so they take a diet pill to get going, and they go all day long, and then they have a martini before dinner, and maybe one earlier in the afternoon, and then they're still kind of wired from the diet pills, and so they take a sleeping pill to go to sleep at night, and the same thing goes on in the morning. Now, I mean, this is what they're supposed to. Then they complain about kids smoking dope and taking pills, and all that the kids have had to see from the minute they were, you know, old enough to realize what was going on were people taking pills. You know, there seems to be some discrepancy somewhere.
The Los Angeles Suicide Prevention Center tells us that drugs now account for 40% of all recorded suicides.
Drugs. The problem grows. The user suffers. And society struggles to find solutions. I'm Jerry Dunphy, and for the next hour, I'd like to explore with you the dilemma of drug abuse in our communities. Our premise is that we're poorly informed, that there are truths and myths about drugs which cry for clarification. And we particularly invite the attention of young viewers, especially if you turn on.
If You Turn On is presented by KNXT and is sponsored in part by General Foods.
I'm going to use the wrong amount of Maxim to prove it's richer than the other leading freeze-dried coffee. Spoonful for spoonful, Maxim weighs more than the other leading freeze-dried. We pack more coffee into every spoonful. So when you make Maxim, you should use less. Less Maxim gives you more rich coffee flavor. So if you want more rich, strong coffee flavor, remember our Maxim. Less is more.
Orange Plus takes you back to the flavor of fresh orange juice. Orange juice is sweet. So is Orange Plus. Orange juice is loaded with pulp. So is Orange Plus. Orange juice is delicious. So is Orange Plus. Because Orange Plus is half orange juice, half flavor enhancers. And furthermore, Bird's Eye's Orange Plus is as convenient as frozen orange juice. Orange Plus. It tastes too good to come in a can.
The drug abuse problem has reached epidemic proportions. The community is worried. The hooked generation is defensive. Everyone has his opinions, his prejudices, and his theories when it comes to the subject of drugs. What are the myths? What are the truths? On the one hand, there's an appeal for more anti-drug laws. On the other, there's a movement for more lenient laws. Between the extremes, there's a vast middle ground of opinion, some of it fact, some of it fiction, and much of it based on limited information. There's a need for clarification. And toward that end, we've developed 8 provocative statements about drug abuse. 8 statements to be classified as truth or myth. They'll be presented and discussed by 2 kinds of experts: professionals who deal with the drug abuse problem on a day-to-day basis, and youngsters from the Southern California area, some who've never used drugs, and others with a personal history of drug abuse. We're also grateful to concerned citizens Greg Morris, Artie Johnson, and Carol Burnett. And now the first of our truth or myth statements. Marijuana is physically addictive. What's your opinion? Is that a truth or is it a myth? Marijuana is physically addictive.
Cannabis, hemp, marijuana. In the street, it's called grass, pot, or weed. This is a kilo. It weighs about a pound. These dried leaves, when rolled into a paper, make a marijuana cigarette, known as a stick or a joint. This is a lid of marijuana, the current price for which is $15. The question, aside from the dollars, is what's the real cost of a marijuana habit?
When you get into talking about habitual use of marijuana, you are talking about possibly habitual use to anything. Someone once used the word hype in describing, almost anything you can get hyped onto. You can habitually use, the 5 o'clock movie, or beer, or marijuana, or people that use an aspirin every night to go to bed.
Among the people I associate with, marijuana took on the form of a social habit, more or less like before dinner drink with older people. And we'd sit around and smoke a joint socially instead of perhaps having a drink.
But from my own experience, I've never been hooked or strung out on weed. I guess I had an emotional dependency, but I was never hooked.
I work at the Los Angeles Free Clinic, and we've never, or maybe I don't think we've ever had a case of anyone coming in and saying they had a problem with marijuana, addiction or use.
Well, I know from experience, because I've been arrested before because of marijuana and big quantities of it, and where I was living, we had to smoke a lot of it to get rid of it. And and it got pretty bad because, like, we had maggots in the house because marijuana, after a while, after heavy usage of it, makes you really passive and very tired. And your mind's really spaced out, and you just don't really care about anything except just sitting there and just tripping out.
If you talk about somebody with a heavy marijuana habit, I assume you're talking about somebody who's smoking marijuana very often. And the question I would ask is, what aren't they doing when they're smoking marijuana? Why aren't there enough satisfying things for them to do without turning on? And why does turning on make the things that they're doing so much more satisfying if that's the excuse people are using? So my question goes more to what isn't being done during that time.
Well, I think that by saying that marijuana causes a loss of motivation, marijuana isn't necessarily the cause, it's just a parallel circumstance. Because there is no drug that's going to change your mind and make you do something that you don't want to. It has to be inside anyway, in the first place. And people who really get hung up on marijuana usually have a deeper problem, something more serious than just, smoking joints all the time.
There is a physical addiction to tobacco, which there is not to marijuana. And there is a physical addiction to heroin, but there is no physical addiction to marijuana, although many people do develop a psychological dependence which makes it necessary for them to smoke it whenever they become anxious.
Marijuana is physically addictive. Truth or myth? Television station KNXT in Los Angeles commissioned the Field Research Corporation to sample public opinion on drugs. A total of 504 persons over 18 years old were interviewed in Los Angeles and Orange counties, California. This sampling was taken in March of this year. And here are the answers to our survey. Marijuana is physically addictive. 50%, one half of those interviewed, believe this statement is true. Only 33%, one-third of those polled, thought it was a myth, and 17% were undecided. We also sampled the opinions of 40 recognized authorities on drug abuse, medical men, counselors, psychologists, social workers, on the same statement. Marijuana is physically addictive. Their response: truth, 10%, myth, 85%, undecided 5%. The public opinion and expert opinion do not agree. With regard to the addictiveness of marijuana, most professionals warn us of potential psychological or emotional dependence as a result of habitual marijuana use. However, as for our statement, marijuana is physically addictive, that's a myth, despite public opinion to the contrary. How well are we informed about drugs? Is there an information gap? Take uppers, for example. What are they? Ask any high school student. He'll tell you that uppers are stimulants. Try this statement. Stimulant drugs, such as pep pills and speed, are potential killers. Is that a truth or a myth, in your opinion?
Uppers, the stimulants, the amphetamines and the methamphetamines, the pep pills and the diet pills. Bennies or whites to keep you awake. Dexies and hearts. These come in all colors to pep you up, at least temporarily. And there's liquid speed and tablet speed. Crystals. This is a powder which comes in papers. This is the stuff that speed freaks inject into their bloodstreams. They tell me that much of this is homemade, with no guarantee of what it contains when you buy it on the street. It's sort of a chemical roulette, isn't it?
I don't know, just, you know, speaking for myself, you know, if I was, you know, speeding or something, and, you know, my brain was dripping out my ear, you know, it wouldn't really matter. You know, I just kind of stuff it back in. And it's like there was a hole in my, my mental body, you might say, you know, and I tried filling it with drugs, you know, and it didn't, you know, I thought it filled it for a while, you know, did a pretty good job, you know, but it kind of lost its thing for me, you know, and I just, sap. I filled it with something else, you know, something that's real, you know, and not chemically induced.
People have driven from as far away as South Orange County to the Los Angeles Free Clinic because there was no place they could feel that they could take these people who were sick or dying. And so they brought them to us, and by the time they got them to us, they were already dead, and there wasn't anything we could do.
Yeah, the illegality of drugs makes it almost impossible to get immediate treatment. And this has probably resulted in many deaths or near deaths because they couldn't get to the hospital because they didn't want to be busted.
Well, since I've been sitting here and hearing about all these drugs, I couldn't relate to them really because, see, I come from, I guess you'd call it a form of a ghetto, a barrio. It's a Chicano barrio. And these drugs they've been talking about right now, I hope this doesn't sound prejudiced, but it's more like white man's drugs. Because, see, down where I live, you can't afford these drugs. They cost too much. And also, these drugs are realization drugs. And who wants to realize they live in a barrio? They live in poverty. And that they're persecuted, you know, a persecuted race. But what I really wanted to say is our big problem down there is reds, RDs, barbiturates. It's really bad.
You know, it's a heavy come down, so you just take more. And speed is, you know, really hard on the body. But you can get it just about anywhere.
Pep pills and bennies contain the, as well as diet pills, contain the same ingredients that are in speed, crystal, or whatever the current terminology is. These are used not only by young people, but in very vast quantities by middle-aged and older people. They can, in moderate quantities, precipitate serious psychotic disorders.
We find that people who abuse these drugs, for the most part, have a great inadequacy about themselves and feel very impotent as people. And the reason they use speed is because it makes them feel so powerful and positive. Amphetamines kill brain cells, and in the autopsies of those children who've been found dead from amphetamines, there is tremendous destruction of the brain cells themselves, which are never replaced. So anyone who shoots amphetamines is slowly destroying their brain and killing the cells which will not regenerate.
Stimulant drugs, such as pep pills and speed, are potential killers. Truth or myth? First, a look at the answers from our public opinion survey. The overwhelming opinion here is that the statement is a truth. 87% to 5% with only 8% undecided. How does that jibe with our survey of 40 recognized authorities? Here, too, there's little argument. 95% to 5% favoring truth. However, when used moderately, according to prescription, stimulants do serve a legitimate medical purpose. But we're concerned with the abuse of these drugs, drugs which stimulate the central nervous system, affect respiration, and can aggravate the heart. But our statement, stimulant drugs, such as pep pills and speed, are potential killers, is definitely true. From uppers, the logical step is to downers, the depressant drugs. These drugs, called barbiturates, are very prominent in today's drug scene, particularly among teens, and sad to say, pre-teens. We know they're addictive, but how dangerous are they when compared, for example, with a well-known hard drug like heroin? Our statement, withdrawal from barbiturates, such as sleeping pills, is more dangerous than heroin withdrawal. Truth or myth?
They call them downers. They're the depressants, the sleeping pills classified as barbiturates. Many of you have them at home in your medicine cabinets. In the drug culture, out in the streets and at your neighborhood school, you can show them to the kids and they'll tell you what they're called. Reds, yellow jackets, rainbows, blue heavens. Colorful pills, aren't they? Colorful names, too. But they don't make for a very colorful life.
For reds, I really put down on them because they're mainly a bust. And also, you can die from them. I know through experience because I have ended up in the hospital twice.
Or I would say any area of Los Angeles area, I would say is predominantly black or gradually becoming predominantly black. We very seldom hear of people going through withdrawals. Most of the time when you hear of, you know, a bad case, you know, behind barbiturates, it's when we go to one of the morgues or to the mortuary or something and see, you know, sometime your best friend laying there dead off of different barbiturates.
Well, like I was talking to these chicks once, because like, if you want reds, all you got to do is go in the heads and schools, and you just sit there for a while and you get them. And I was telling him about the withdrawals and what can happen, and they didn't believe me.
Barbiturates for me, that was my bag, you know. I was a downer freak, and like, I don't know. See, like the girl said before, you know, is, you know, fun stumbling around and, you know, doing, you know, whatever you feel is, you know. For me, I felt when I was on downers, you know, I was doing what I really wanted to do, you know. I was really loose. I really got loose, you know. I could say, well, I better not say it. And I really felt loose, you know. I felt I was more me, you know. And when I came down off the downers, you know, while I was all paranoid, you know, I crawled back in my little, you know, shell, and like downers just brought, you know, this out of me, you know, got really loose and things, you know, and like I got strung out using so many a day, you know, and when I put down on them, you know, I didn't go to the hospital, you know. I heard that you could die, you know, and things like that, but that really didn't bother me, you know, because I really didn't give it.
When you talk about withdrawal per se from Seconal, Amitol, reds, blue heavens, yellows, yellow jackets, whatever, whatever type of barbiturate that you're talking about, the chances of convulsing, not just while you're feeling bad, and sincerely, I had been busted, put in a county jail, and I convulsed my 8th day, and I was clean. I convulsed my 8th day with no problem. I got just a taste upset, and I convulsed. And, you know, thank goodness I was in a closed setting where there were other addicts, and, you know, I had immediate attention. You go into grand mal seizures. Actually, I heard a doctor say, or one of the gentlemen over here, that it isn't as painful. God, I didn't even want to, I had pain, and it was longer lasting. It didn't just come and it was gone. I had it longer, and it's harder, I can honestly say, for me to stay away from Reds than it is to stay away from heroin, because they are so plentiful. And I used to kick a heroin habit with Reds, and then I'd convulse, you know. And I really, because I wasn't educated enough, you know, the majority of time when people convulse, they die, you know. No, but everybody's too loaded to even stick a spoon in their mouth, you know. But really, there is a strong danger, and any time you think that it's not you, you know, try to get doctors' attention, because you can convulse up to 8 to 10 days later, and I mean it, because I did my 8th day clean. I convulsed straight out, and that's the way it was. Thank you.
As far as the withdrawal from a heavy addiction to barbiturates, they are in fact more dangerous than withdrawal from heroin, perhaps somewhat less painful. The person who is withdrawing from heroin is terribly sick. He's in pain. He is one of the most miserable of God's creatures, but only very seldom does he die from this very dreadful experience. It's a little bit like being seasick. You're not dead, but you wish you were. As far as the barbiturates are concerned, less painful, but they can cause severe acute psychosis. They cause seizures, epileptic seizures, and a certain proportion of people will die unless they're properly cared for.
Withdrawal from barbiturates, such as sleeping pills, is more dangerous than heroin withdrawal. Our public opinion survey tells us that only 11% of the general public think this statement is true. 55% believe it's a myth. 34% didn't know. What about the experts sampled? Here, opinion is on the side of truth rather than myth. 57% to 40%, with 3% undecided. Again, a marked difference between public opinion and professional opinion. What conclusions can be made? The heroin addicts and the tortures of withdrawal are well known. It is torturous, and we have no intention of minimizing the horrible discomfort of heroin withdrawal. However, we've heard little about the dangers of barbiturate addiction. We know less than we should about the risks and the abuse of downers, sleeping pills. The experts agree, and the youngsters back them up. Withdrawal from barbiturates, such as sleeping pills, is more dangerous than heroin withdrawal. That is a truth. How are your opinions comparing to the experts? Our youngsters tell us about the availability of downers, uppers, grass, and heroin in their neighborhoods and in their schools. Law enforcement agencies are engaged in a constant battle in their efforts to stem the tide of drug trafficking. Where do most young people get their drugs? This leads us to our fourth statement. Most youngsters are introduced to drugs by professional pushers. Truth or myth?
When I started using drugs, it was a type of thing where I didn't have peer pressure, or there wasn't no person that came out of the, dark and captured me. It was a type of thing that I was curious and I wanted to know what it was. And I started meeting people that were using drugs, and I started finding out and learning how to get loaded, I learned how to score, I learned how to clean weed, I learned how to fix, and I learned, I learned the whole gamut that connects with drugs, But the things that I didn't look at were me.
I was introduced to drugs by just another person in school, and I just passed it on. And I don't know where the professionals are.
Like, I didn't turn on any innocent kids because they all came to me and said, look, I want to buy a lid. Fine. So I would sell them a lid, and the $10 that they would give me, selling 6 or 7 lids, I could go out and buy another key. Like, I wasn't being a professional, I was just supporting my own habit. And I don't, like somebody said, I don't see this guy in a black cloak hiding in the bushes, 3 o'clock in the morning trying to seduce little kids, hey, little girl, you want some candy? That's not where it's at all.
When you talk about professional pushers, whether or not most teenagers are introduced to drugs by them, in the conventional sense of the professional pusher, no, they're not. I think probably the professional pushers in our society are the advertising agencies. It really upsets me when I see some woman who's in her kitchen slaving away at night on television, and she takes a pill and she's riding a horse on a beach. And it just blows my mind. And if I could do that, I probably would. You know, I'd love to go riding on the beach instead of being in the kitchen or something. The other, there's a very popular commercial which talks about the problems in our society and how hard it is to get up in the morning and read that paper about another plane crash or another hijacking or another bombing somewhere. And if you just take this little pill, you're fine. And I think this is what tends to turn a lot of people on. So I think we're introduced to drugs, and teenagers are introduced to drugs by the mass media, by parents, and but I think the question was aimed at getting at directly was who turns you on? Who is the person that gives you your drug? And when it comes to that, most teenagers get them from their friends. The drugs that are being abused are gotten from their friends. But the whole concept is pushed on us every day by the society.
Most youngsters are introduced to drugs by professional pushers. Fact or fiction? A look at our sampling of households in Orange and Los Angeles counties provides something of a contrast with what our studio guests have been telling us. 52%, the majority, classify this as a myth. A large number, 42%, believe the statement to be true, and 6% are undecided. Now, what about the professionals we surveyed? Another marked difference. 95% of the experts surveyed classified this statement as a myth. It may well be that behind the scenes, out of sight, are the money men of drugs, the underworld. But on the street level, according to the youngsters here with us, the professional pushers, the big dealers, are remote. They undoubtedly exist, but as for our statement, most youngsters are introduced to drugs by professional pushers. The preponderance of opinion among the professionals and the youngsters themselves is that the statement is a myth. The fact is that most youngsters are introduced to drugs by their friends. Now, what about acid, peyote, STP? Hallucinations used to refer to the bizarre aberrations of the mentally ill, the psychotics, the schizophrenics. Could it be that this is no longer true? Statement: hallucinogenic drugs, such as LSD, contribute to creative productivity. Right or wrong?
These are the so-called mind-expanding drugs, the hallucinogens. As you can see, there are many kinds, but the most common, aside from marijuana, is D-lethargic acid diethylamide, LSD. It's a little pill, slightly smaller than an aspirin, that's called orange sunshine. If you see one of these little goodies around the house, you may be sure that a trip is being planned. You've heard about acid trips, haven't you? Some people get so high, they actually think they can fly.
Well, when I started taking drugs, I started out with marijuana, but then I led on to hallucinogenic drugs. Because I do a lot of artwork myself, I started exploring all the creative possibilities that I could think of in hallucinogenics. But the strange thing, and probably the most evident thing I found, is that the key word in this question that they're asking about creative productivity is how much work you can really produce. You may have a lot of thoughts in your head, and I had a lot of really great ideas for new kind of art forms that I devised in my head, but I have nothing actually there. It's still rambling around in the back of my head somewhere, and it hasn't really gone down my arms and come out to my fingers. Now, when I'm on LSD, psychedelic drugs like that, and I start drawing, sooner or later my hands start shaking, and the pen falls right out of my hand. That's really a bummer, because you can't do anything like that. You can't get anything accomplished if all it is in your head, because the role of an artist is to present what's in his head to the public, some kind of creative faculty that he has. And if it's just inside your body and the other people can't see it, it's worthless.
One thing, it's like my world under the influence of LSD was an out of sight world, but when I came down, it was gone, you know. It's like we did this finger painting on LSD, and we go, out of sight, man. You know, we're artists. You know, we're going to go to the museum and, you know, sell it. Or, you know, we take acid and do paintings. But when I came down and we looked at it, it was gone. It wasn't as good, you know? And so whatever you think on LSD, like you think I thought I found the key to the, you know, the universe. But you got to stay high to keep it, you know? Like Leary, you know, he's got to stay high to keep his thing going, you know? But when you come down, it's gone. You know, that world is gone.
Like, I could see that I was afraid of certain things on acid, and then when I came down, you know, it wasn't any different because I just reacted in the same way and shined everyone on the same as I was doing before and just kind of played the same games that I was doing. And it wasn't until, you know, I just completely got away from that and had a chance to look into myself that I could really see what was happening and act on that, you know, so I could change some of the things that were going on.
To me, Disneyland is just as much a fantasy as taking LSD is, only it's a lot safer.
In this country, we haven't really investigated the drug and are generally quite afraid of it. The studies on creativity have shown that people who take LSD are not as creative in what they produce, but may have very creative and even religious experiences while taking the drug.
I'd like, however, to add a point here, and that is that, like most of the questions that have been discussed today, it's, the answer to them is yes, no, and maybe. There are no clear-cut answers to any of these questions, including chromosome damage, including creativity, or the answers are all three.
Hallucinogenic drugs, such as LSD, contribute to creative productivity. 66%, 2/3 of the general public classify this as a myth. 13% were undecided, but 21%, roughly 1 out of every 5 people, believe the statement to be true. As for our experts, they regard this statement as myth. 90% myth, 5% truth, 5% undecided. Both polls are in agreement that there is little productive activity as the result of hallucinogenic drugs. And thus we classify the statement, hallucinogenic drugs such as LSD contribute to creative productivity, a myth. Now we turn to a basic question, a simple word with no simple answer. The word is why. Why do youngsters turn on? Our truth or myth statement, most young people turn to drugs because it's fashionable. Most young people turn to drugs because it's fashionable.
Clothes, music, art, all part of being fashionable. A glance at the underground press or a visit to your neighborhood psychedelic shop makes it quite clear, if you didn't know already, that drugs and the culture that surround them are very much in. The accoutrements of drugs, from water pipes to posters to roach clips to psychedelic lights and candles, seem to be today's scene. What are they trying to tell us? That drugs are fun and games? Today's fad and fashion. We do tend to conform, don't we? Maybe it's just natural to follow the crowd. But the drug crowd? Where are they going?
I think it starts out being something fashionable. I mean, like, it's fun. Like, the first time you go out and the guy says, hey, I got a J, you know. And he takes it out and you see his little crumb piece of paper and sure, go, you know. We'll go behind a bar and smoke it. And you do, and it becomes fashionable in a way that, after a while, it's fun to sit there with a group of people and share the common feeling that you're scared that the cops are going to come with their flashlights and everything. But after a while, it begins to filter down separate lines. Everyone sort of goes into their different directions, and they take drugs in their own way. And that's when it's not fashionable anymore.
I think that there's a lot of different reasons why people take drugs, but I know when I was taking drugs, I wanted people to know. And so, like, I dressed a certain way, I acted a certain way, I talked a certain way, so people would know. A lot of the trip was, you know, like that groovy guy over there was talking about when he said, you know, you just wanted to say to the establishment, to all these things that you couldn't handle, you know, like, defy them, you know, like, just tell them that they were terrible. And so you would, I know a lot of people would deliberately say, yeah, I'm taking drugs, you know, to tell the world that they were, you know, screwed up, you know. And like, I guess there's certain people that take drugs and don't want anyone to know, but I know all my friends They wanted people to know it was a status thing, it was a powerful thing, it was a trip where, you know, yeah, we're taking drugs and you guys are screwed, you know. It was it was a very negative type of thing, you know. I mean, like, we were getting power putting down on, you know, all the established things that we couldn't handle. I mean, I know, at least with me, it was my inability to handle things down. And the reasons, you know, why I took drugs, and I wanted people to know, you know, I was crying out. It was a very definite thing to get attention. And other people might not want people to know, but I know I did.
You could call it sort of a fashion, but the people that are in it really don't feel that way about it as it being a fashion. It's more of a, you know, nobody really cares.
I do feel it's fashionable. It's in our music, it's in our dress, it's in our schools, it's in our parents, it's in our babies. It is most definitely fashionable.
Fashion, I think, is just a big hang-up. It's not fashion. There's a reason for everything. And I think depression, inferiority, and things like that are why so many black mid-city students do use drugs. And when I say drugs, and I'm referring to black mid-city students, I'm not talking about hallucinogenics or anything. I'm talking about RDs, Red Devils, Yellow Jackets, Blue Heavens, things like that, because that's all we can afford.
We're talking about nonconformity, and yet everything that the youth have done have been to conform to certain things. And so we're not really doing what we necessarily want to do. I mean, you have to think about it personally. Are you doing what you want to do when you're taking drugs? Or are you doing something that somebody's made a mold and you're just pouring yourself into it, you know?
To say most young people use drugs because they're fashionable seems to me to be a universal cop-out. It's a terrific way of repressing what the real problems are. We might better say that drugs are fashionable because most young people use them.
Most young people turn to drugs because it's fashionable. 60% of the public sampling classify this statement as a truth. 32% call the statement a myth. 8% undecided. As for the professionals who were asked, the majority, 57%, say the statement is true. 32% myth, 11% undecided. There are, of course, no absolutes, particularly in a statement like this one. The responses were mixed, but the majority opinion, both public and professional, classifies the statement, most young people turn to drugs because it's fashionable, as a truth. Most of the youngsters in our studio disagree. They classify drugs as a substitute for other things in their lives. But fashion is a prime motive in the opinion of those sampled. How does the drug habit start? Try this statement. Marijuana is usually a stepping stone to more dangerous drugs. Yes or no?
Dangerous drugs? Well, here's a dangerous drug. Did you ever hear of smack, H, junk? This is it, folks. Heroin. This is the way they carry it. Isn't that cute? Very charming. And this, I'm told, has replaced the needle and the syringe. Plain ordinary eyedropper. They use a razor to cut a vein. Nice. Then they just drop a little of this stuff, liquefied, this smack, this garbage, directly into the bloodstream. They say it makes it easier for the kids to use it. Kids, little kids, 10, 11, 12-year-olds. I hear about it. I read about it. And I agonize about it.
Okay, as this thing, marijuana being a stepping stone, I tend to find with parents, this is their main gripe about grass, is that it'll lead on to stronger drugs. And it seems to me that people, if they're going to go on to stronger drugs, they don't have to start with grass.
What I understood, like, was pot was addicting, and I found out pot wasn't addicting for me, you know? And, you know, society lied to me about pot, you know, so why not acid, and, you know, why not everything else?
Okay, you can usually buy amphetamines or bennies or dexies from your, I guess, your local weed dealer. The man who has the grass usually can supply you with these.
I kind of think that it is kind of a stepping stone. I mean, you do
usually start, if you're going to get in the drug scene, you usually do start with marijuana first. I did. But I think what this society does is that they take the whole drug scene and they blow it out of proportion, and they don't see that it's just a whole life pattern. I started way before drugs. When I started drugs at 11, at 10 I started smoking cigarettes and drinking wine. And at 9 I started fighting. And in the 3rd grade I started robbing the school. And it's all the same thing. It's just a whole life pattern of a self-destructive, it's just a self-destructive pattern. And I was crying out for help. I wanted somebody to say, hey man, why are you doing that? Instead of when they caught me, spank me and say, bad boy, and you shouldn't do that. You know, I wanted somebody to really care about me and say, you know, like, you know, why are you doing this? You know, why do you want to destroy other people and at the same time destroy you? And I never got that. When I got busted, every time I got home, and even when I was down at the police station, everybody, all they had to say was, you can kill yourself. If you take one more down, or if you just took one more, you could kill yourself and you could die. And I knew that. I knew that way before I even started it. I wanted somebody to say, hey, man, I'm really scared that you may kill yourself. And I never got that. I never got that from anybody, and that's what I wanted the most. And I just never felt it all my life until finally somebody finally reached out to me, and I really felt that they cared about me. And that's what I needed all my life.
Marijuana, a stepping stone to more dangerous drugs. Our Southern California sample reveals that the majority agree with that statement. 86% said it was so. Only 11% called it a myth. Very few, 3%, were undecided on this one. Although the authorities we asked were less unanimous, 52% truth, 40% myth, and 8% undecided, our surveys agree. It's clear that buying marijuana brings the user into contact with dealers. The availability of other drugs to the marijuana user is obvious. Also, since smoking marijuana is against the law, its illegal use perpetuates a dangerous attitude toward the law, a cheerful defiance, some people call it. Some of our youngsters did not agree. However, on the basis of professional opinion, the statement, marijuana is usually a stepping stone to more dangerous drugs, is true. The dilemma of drug abuse summons up a variety of villains, depending upon your point of view. Many people blame society for the drug abuse crisis. Among the youngsters, key phrases come up time and time again. Racism, the draft, the Vietnam War, the frustrations of what they call a materialistic society. Do these explain today's drug crisis? Is it a fact or a fallacy that drug abusers can be cured only by changing the society in which they live?
When I started turning on, I found something that I could do just as good as everybody else, and that was getting loaded, you know, and I did a pretty damn good job of getting loaded, you know, and I could be whoever I wanted to be when I was getting loaded. You know, if I wanted to be Superman or whoever I wanted to be, you know, just give me the right type of drugs. And I never was strung out, you know, but I had a drug problem, and I never realized it until I talked to another person that went through the same thing I went through, another ex-drug user, you know, and I seen a little bit of me in him, and I realized, hey, maybe I do have a problem. And I tried putting down, they told me, put down for 30 days, and if you don't dig it, man, we'll refund your misery. It's as simple as that, you know? And like, I've been down now, and I'm digging being down. And like, if there's anybody who doesn't want to get loaded anymore, there's some help available.
Nobody can change society loaded. If you're gonna stay loaded, you're not gonna do anything. But stay there and sit there and, you know, stay loaded. If it's 25 years, you'll be loaded and society will still be the same. You're not gonna do anything.
The people who are drug abusers are people who have deep problems in relating to others, in finding themselves meaningful, and this is something that we can help others with through the means that we already have. One of the ways is by giving people the opportunity to belong to groups where they become meaningful. Another way is to stop punishing them as if they were evil for having experimented with life in this way. And a third way is giving them an experience in education and school which is meaningful.
there are so many people in this world that really don't care and really could care less about all these people in here. Here in this room are people that really care, and there are programs, but there aren't enough. What everybody needs and this world needs is more people who really care, and that's all I have to say.
At the present time, most facilities are either in contact with the police department or they are so loosely managed that these people who have been off drugs for some time have easy access. I have heard the statement, once a drug abuser, always a drug abuser. Not that the person will continue to use, but that desire, that possibility usually lingers, and steps should be taken to give a person a chance to rehabilitate, to reorganize his life, and give him another lease on life.
I find it's pretty hard talking to a camera, but to those people out there that probably aren't even involved in drugs or that older, say you're 40 or 50, what I could say that you could do personally is that treat everybody as an individual, and that you try to understand and feel people more. And also when you see somebody that's hurting, or also the younger people, don't try to shut them off, because I don't think the problems with drugs are not just the drug problems. They're related to other things that, problems in society that you as an individual have to change, and for what you feel and for what you think, even though it might hurt you a little bit, or people might look at you a little bit differently.
I don't believe I can change my society as one person, and I hurt. I don't want to hurt forever, and I don't want to hurt right now. I have tools as a result of being clean. I can see there are many agencies to clean up in. Many, many, if you can get out of a dense fog to find them. And once you've found them, they stay there. People want to stay clean. And they're there. My society will not change. I can, as one person, through a group unity, work each and every day to grow. I have no rights. I can develop rights. And it's groovy to feel like a human being. You know, all program, we've been very serious. And I want to say, I'm happy and I laugh an awful lot. I've laughed an awful lot today. And that's very important, because I wouldn't give up drugs for something I wasn't going to have any fun in. And I laugh a lot, and I like laughing with people. That's all. Thank you.
But one thing we failed to mention the spiritual man, the deep-rooted man inside that has to be met. And unless he is met, we cannot go any farther. 20 years ago, we were dealing only with the physical problem. The percentage-wise of drug cures was very low. 10 years ago, we started dealing with the psychological and emotional. When will we get turned on to dealing with the spiritual? When? And only then can we start doing something. There's many people here today, for anybody out there that wants help, many programs, everybody here wants to help because they're concerned people. Free clinic, done, RIF, many, many programs, Teen Challenge. We're here to help you. That's the main thing.
Drug abusers can be cured only by changing the society in which they live. Truth or myth? 55% of our Southern California sample call this statement a myth. 35% agree with the statement, and 10% are undecided. This time, there's more agreement on the part of the experts than among the public. 18% call the statement a truth. 12% were undecided, but 70% labeled the statement a myth. From our surveys and from the statements of our studio guests, particularly those youngsters who have turned off drugs and turned on to a more meaningful life, we must classify the statement, drug abusers can be cured only by changing the society in which they live, a myth. Indeed, there's much evidence that drug abusers are not without hope. Witness, if you will, the youngsters who've shared their experiences and their frustrations with us. As one of the counselors who works with teenagers points out, the goal is not so much to create a better world as it is to create better people to live in the world. It's one thing to quote statistics, to render somber warnings, to criticize and to condemn. It's quite another to listen and to learn and to place personal opinion into a new perspective. We've listened, particularly to young people, because we believe in them and because they want to be heard. We've dealt with truths, with myths, with opinions, but we've really been searching for fact. We have a pamphlet for you. It's a fact pamphlet. Several pages, illustrations, drawings, and most importantly, facts. If you want the pamphlet, call us. The number in Los Angeles is
520-1212. 520-1212.
Operators are waiting. One to a customer. There is no cost.
520-1212.
You'll get this pamphlet in the mail if you call before midnight tonight. That's one number. That's our fact number. Now for some other numbers. They're help numbers. Get a pencil if you want. There's time. A number will appear for your area. It will be a hotline number. If you are turned on to drugs and want off, the telephone number for your area may well be the most important number you've dialed, ever. Remember, if you want the fact pamphlet, dial
520-1212. 520-1212.
If you want help, if you know anyone who needs help, a hotline number for your area will be shown in a moment. Help is available if you turn on.
I don't care if you smoke pot on the weekends, man, head on, you know, that's cool too. You know, whatever gets you, you know, whatever turns you on. But man, if you're running yourself into the ground, you don't got it anymore, you know, because there's some people here that got a solution, you know. Together, man, there's different programs here. I'm from one program, there's some people from other different programs, you know. And I think they're gonna, you know, at the end of this, they're gonna show the telephone numbers or whatever, you know. And if you're sitting out that audience, man, ask yourself a question, you know, why am I turning on? You know, when I wasn't loaded, it's because when I couldn't score, that's when I wasn't loaded, you know. And out front, man, I was lying to everybody, you know. I ain't hurting, no, you know. Somebody go, how you doing? I'm doing fine, man, I'm doing great, everything's out of sight, you know. But I was hurting in my gut, and I was afraid to admit it, you know. And when I admitted that I was hurting in my gut, you know, some people started giving me some answers on how to help myself. And today, you know, I'm really grateful. I'm really grateful that I don't have to use anymore, you know. That I don't have to get up in the morning and think, wow, where am I going to get loaded? Because getting loaded for me was a 24-hour-a-day job, you know. It's all I talked about and thought about was drugs. You know, dropped out of high school, you know, I got arrested, split home, you know, did everything. And if you want to play, you got to pay. And if you're sick and tired of paying, you don't have to get loaded anymore, you know? And if you can dig what I'm saying, if you can dig what I'm saying, and if you want a little bit of love, man, the way love really is, and if you want somebody to care, they told me start caring about yourself, you know? So take that phone number down, or whatever it is to get in touch with the group, and find out, you know, and start loving you so you can start loving your brother, man. Until we get it together, man, because we're going to get it together. And I hate to see the young generation, man, that's coming up, the new America, man, be all strung out on junk, you know? I really do, man. I like to see the new America grow up on brotherhood, you know? Because we're playing society's games when we're getting loaded, man. I was so frustrated at society, and I hated the man so much, I'd get loaded. You know, I'll show them I'm going to get loaded. I'll show my parents I can do it. I'm going to get loaded. And I banged my head up against the wall, you know. In a sense, I've joined society. But my day will come, you know, where materialistic value don't count and nothing else don't count but just your brother. You know, that's what I found out. Because that's how I'm staying cleanest, from another dude to another dude, you know. Just the group, man, brotherhood. I learned brotherhood. And
Home, dear. I'm tired. I'm going to relax and read the paper.
George. George really loves his new Peugeot. Peugeot's powerful new engine. Peugeot's fully reclining bucket seats and racing car steering. With Peugeot's four-wheel independent suspension and Peugeot's four-wheel disc brakes.
George, dinner's ready.
See your conveniently located Peugeot dealer and ask for a thorough test drive in one of the new Peugeot. Was presented by KNXT and was sponsored in part by General Foods. If you want the fact pamphlet, the number in Los Angeles is 520-1212. Operators are waiting. There is no cost. The number in Los Angeles again, 520-1212. If you are outside the Los Angeles dialing area, you must dial area code 213-520-1212. If the lines are busy, please call again. Our operators will be here to serve you until midnight tonight. For the fact pamphlet, dial 520-1212. If you want immediate help or know someone who needs immediate help, dial the hotline phone number in your area. If you miss the hotline phone number, it can be obtained by dialing information 411. Dial 411 and ask for the hotline number.